Well, hello there, and welcome to the Poetry News with myself, with Eddie, with Squigs, and our guest host again, Elemental. How you doing, everyone? You okay?
All good.
Hey, folks, how you doing?
Doing
Good,
great.
good. Thank you. It's really nice to see everyone. Just to say, unfortunately, it's Arsene's turn to be ill this time, so we wish Arsene a very speedy recovery and hope to have her back with us soon. But in the meantime, as proven by the last couple of shows, Elemental is an absolute super sub. So welcome again.
Happy to have you, Elemental.
Appreciate you all, truly.
Yeah, and it's great to have you back as well, Eddie. Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Definitely
Thank you.
welcome back,
Thank you
Eddie.
very much.
Fantastic. So we have an absolutely packed show coming up today. We have portraits of a place. We have winners from Haven. We have the Wolverhampton Literary Festival. But first, we go over to Portland, Oregon, to the Grief Rites Foundation. So, the Grief Rites Foundation is a community movement providing awareness, advocacy, education, and monthly storytelling showcases for people experiencing grief. There's lots of people out there experiencing it. We all do at certain points. They are indefinitely open for submissions of your personal stories of grief, including poetry. Quoting from their website, they say, "We are looking for your real, true stories of loss and grief, told by you and for you. The stories that slay us, that lay us bare, the stories that are the hardest to tell. Make us laugh and cry until tears slide down our cheeks and fall onto our keyboard. Make us fall apart and put ourselves back together, different than we were before. Make us give up hope and then want to find it again, or not, because grief is tricky like that." Submissions should be up to around 1,500 words, and you can submit up to 5 poems at a time. It's free to submit, however, there's no money for submission. The only thing they really insist on is that it's your story and not a fictional story. Certainly, when I've been going through periods of grief in the past, I wish I'd known about something like this sooner. So if this is of interest to you, you can find full submission details and all social media links at griefritesfoundation.org. That's grief, R-I-T-E-S, foundation.org. At this point, I'd like to bring back Elemental, Squigs, and Eddie to ask you, what did you think about this? Any thoughts?
I find it really interesting that they, in the description, you quoted and said it's poetry by you and for you, which is extremely important for people who are grieving, because when we are grieving and when we write poetry about grief, we are writing it for us to cathartic, for us to let it out, for us to express ourselves. Even if people don't read it, we're doing all of this for us, for the poet themselves. So it is really, really interesting how they phrased the description of the website and of the community. And this one line struck me: by you and for you. It is really important for us to acknowledge that when we do write about these things, we are writing it for us.
Yeah, I have to say that's 100% spot on. When you kind of cater it to a certain group, you clearly you're gonna speak a certain language, right? And that just helps to kind of convey your story, because now you're that much more in tune with your audience, that much more connected with them, because you're speaking a language that they can understand. Right. And that is when you really start opening doors to learning, to real expression, and sharing creativity and the creative energy that it creates. So I really, really love that.
I think grief is an experience we'll all have to go through in our lives. As well, I think that the end of grief is appreciation. Like when you can finally get to the point where you can look back and say thank you. And what better way to commemorate or even mark that moment in your life with a poem? I think poetry by itself is an act of appreciation, anyways. It's a wonderful website to check out. Thank you, Martin.
Absolutely. I am interested in what you say, Squigs. It's like when grief ends. Do you think grief ever really ends, or because I know there's a line on their website that I saw. I can't quite remember it exactly, but it's like grief doesn't end. We just learn to live with it. Just wonder what you guys think about that.
The irony is that does not grief teach us that everything ends?
Oh, wow.
Interesting point. I don't have the answer, but yeah, it's a really interesting point.
Indeed. I'm a proponent of the 7 stages of grief. Because when my father passed away, I actually focused on those and knew that I had to kind of go through those. But then I came to realize that there is no timeline when it comes to going through those stages, right? And people could easily get stuck in stage 2 or 3 or 4 for the rest of their lives and not get to the final stage of acceptance, right? So it really just depends on, I think grief just kind of puts us in a space that it makes us do some things that we don't always want to do. But it also helps us to acknowledge the things that are absolutely there and need the energy. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you everyone for your thoughts on that. And to any of our viewers who are experiencing grief, our thoughts are with you, and hopefully this website will help. So for anyone interested, griefritesfoundation.org, and all of our links will be below. So thank you everyone for your thoughts on that, and we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Eddie, and I'm joining you from Batoon, the north of Lebanon. I'm back after a couple weeks off, and I'm good. And today I am bringing you a new workshop that is actually really amazing. This workshop will take place on 2 installments, one on the 7th of December, and the other will take place on the 11th of January, kind of a month from now. And this workshop is titled Portrait of a Place, Poetry Workshops with Nafisa Hamid. And it will take place, like I said, on the 7th of December and the 11th of January. And it is curated by the Creative Black Country. The one on the 7th of December will take place at 12:30 p.m. GMT. And it will focus on writing and creating lunes and haikus. A haiku is a Japanese form in which there is an image that is being created using only 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables, the second has 7, and then the last one has 5 syllables. Whereas a lune is an American poem in which there are 3, 5, 3 syllables. And it is really interesting to see how this could shift from one type to another. And the inspiration for this workshop, the first one taking place on the 7th of December, will be journey, adventure, and place. The second workshop will take place, like I said, on the 11th of January. And in it, you will be creating golden shovels inspired by the music and lyrics that you would enjoy, or you enjoy listening to, or you have listened to growing up. A golden shovel is a type of poetry in which you take a line from a poem, a book, a song that you enjoyed, and then you use these words in that one line and you put them at the end of each line that you write. So it is kind of a way to highlight these words, but by placing them at the end, by using them as the end word in each of your lines. This workshop will be held by Birmingham-based poet and playwright Nafisa Hamid, and she will guide you through a series of fun exercises to help you discover your poetic voice. For this workshop, you must be 16 and up, and there's no previous experience necessary, and it will take place on Zoom. I would like to invite my fellow heralds back and see what your opinions on haikus, lunes, and the golden shovel, which is a really interesting to me. I discovered it just recently, and it is a really interesting form of writing.
Yeah, that form of writing makes me immediately think of course, musicians, for which the lyrics they would write, I would appreciate, and just running over in my head. I mean, like the conclusion, or at least the end product, would it not look like obviously an original poem? Like you would, like if you use the words as the last word in each line, that's the journey itself is you're gonna come up with something incredibly different. It might not even maintain the essence, but it'll be definitely something new. I think it's a lovely exercise. It's a great idea for a workshop.
Right.
100%. I would definitely two things. The 353, right? I think when you're trying to create something new, it's important to start with something familiar, right? The format of a haiku, very familiar around the world, right? But then when you bring in a new challenge based on that, I think it's important to really know why you would even want to do that. But again, that's about challenging what is already there, right?
Yeah.
But being fearless enough to take it and change it, right? Kind of like this golden shovel, which I love. Look, anytime that you can fuse music and poetry, the explosion is gonna be magnetic, man. Really. And it's just gonna bring so much more to not only your poetry, but to the song, because we connect with music in different ways, right? Like we connect with poetry. You bring those together, I'm getting goosebumps because it's just that energetic. It's just that powerful of taking all of that creative energy and really changing it into something that's magnificently beautiful. So I love those two things.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Elemental. It's I think again, the more different things you can kind of fuse together, the better result you're going to get, just because something comes from a greater influence. And I think I wasn't familiar with the Loon form haikus, so I always think it's easy to write a haiku. It's very difficult to write a good haiku, just because you're so constrained by the number of syllables. And I imagine a loon is even more so. Golden shovels, I am already familiar with, and I've got to say, I love a golden shovel. One of the great things about, I wouldn't say I've ever written a great golden shovel, but one of the things you can do, it gives you the freedom to make the poem incredibly different from the line you're actually using to have the words at the end of each line of your poem. And that's a very interesting thing when you know something comes from a certain emotional thing, but what you're writing is a complete opposite thing. Also, can definitely recommend Nafeesahamed. Nafisa's book Besharam is really good, published a few years ago. Had the privilege of meeting Nafisa a few times in person, and really nice person, really talented poet, never fails to disappoint and be well read, well researched. So absolutely recommend all of that. Sounds great.
It is. I was just thinking about this kind of fun exercise or experience one would have where someone would take a line and write a golden shovel, and then someone else would take one line of this poem and then write another golden shovel, and then it goes on. It's like a poetry inception kind of thing. That would be cool. That would be a fun exercise to do in a group setting. Yeah, you can go places. You can go anywhere. You can go beyond.
I love that right there, right? Because it could just be different songs, right? Or the same song. You could give the same song to a class full of people, and 10 people are going to pick up on 10 different pieces of that song. That's amazing.
No. Shall we each do that? Shall we each give each other a song and see what we make of that? And then, of course, for anybody watching,
good poetry challenge, man. Always.
I love it. And for anybody watching, you know what to do.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, comment below a line that you would like us to write a shovel poem using, and maybe we'll show you something soon. That is it. So we will take a short break, and then we will go to Elemental right after this.
Welcome back, everyone. to the Poetry News. I am Elemental, standing in for Arson this week. Get well soon, Arson. Today, I have the pleasure of highlighting some of our own. PGN recently had a holiday edition of our Haven Open Mic series, and the two winners of that are incredible ladies. Let me tell you, they brought character and flair to their performances, winning our inaugural costume contest. First, Terry Rose Jertson. She's an artist, a wife, a mother, and peer recovery specialist who took up poetry in 2020 as a way to cope with the new normal. She regularly attends many open mics, including the New Eurekan Poets Cafe, Fincabulary, The Word is Right, Nomadic Press, Society X, Barbed Wire, Poetry in the Brute, and many others. She's actually working on her first poetry collection to be published soon, and she's also one of the authors in a new erotic anthology called Touching Tongues. The other winner is a PGN member, Kimlin Tan Bappy, also known as the Blue Mermaid. This amazing member of Poetry Global Network uses multiple languages and presentation methods to broadcast her lovely forms of poetry and song. She's the host of Between the Lines and a contributing and continuing host of Bottoms Up, Oceania, and Asia. We want to congratulate these two amazing poets on their victory and stepping into new phases of poetic expression. I'm going to bring back my heralds to discuss blending poetry, expression, and character. How do you folks feel?
I am a firm believer that whoever is speaking in the poem, even if they are performing it in front of a crowd, even if I am saying that poem and I wrote it, I am not the speaker in this poem. I am a firm believer in the concept of the death of the author that was put forth by Ronald Barthes. And to me, it's always like the speaker. We're always, whenever we're performing, whenever we're writing a poem on a paper, even if it's not just for performance, it's just for publishing or for it's a page poem. There's always a character there. There's always a mask, or there's always something that it's not me who is speaking in this poem. Who this I in this poem is not mine. It's the speaker. It's independent of me. So it is really interesting to see how um, the poets used not only that concept, but also took it further by putting a show or dressing up in a certain character, because it is performance not only by words, by anything. Everything you do on stage is the performance, including saying the poem itself. It is a performance. It is a mask. It is someone else doing that. It is not you. I am a firm believer, and I always tell my students that whenever you're reading something, do not, whether it's prose or more importantly poetry, it's not the poet who you refer to. It's not the poet speaking. It's always a performance. It's always someone else between the poet and the poem itself. It's this speaker, this persona that is there. And I like that when it comes to life with costumes and just a different character, a completely different character. It's really interesting how it comes to life.
You know what's interesting? It's when I started performing, I took on the stage name that I have now, as all you viewers know me as. Now, is that persona? I don't know. My friends call me Squigs. What do you think, Elemental?
I think it does have to do with persona. I love what Eddie said about not necessarily personally being the I in the poem, but when you embrace it, you become the I. You're just a different I, right? Like clearly, some of us have monikers that we're not born with, right? But in those instances, we become that I, right? So it's really just about knowing which I has it at that moment.
So meta.
Yeah. I think there's levels. There's various levels of which performers can do that as well. So I mean, I know, just a quick aside, there are certain people that when you see them coming along to the open mic, they're going to be fantastic. And I don't know Teresa so well, but I know certainly in the case of Kemlin, whenever Kemlin shows up at the open mic, it's going to be fantastic. And I think costumes can really add to that because it helps put somebody into that character that they're trying to portray. And really, the only question then is how far you can take it. So it's like, I know when I first started performing, I just sort of turn up on a mic and just whatever I just happened to be wearing that day. And I think there was nothing different. There was nothing special about that. I was just kind of turning up. And like now I do tend to try and dress a bit smarter for a poetry performance. And the stage further is adding costume to that. And then the stage further from that is going full character. There's a wonderful poet based, I think, near Birmingham in the UK. There's a Birmingham theme today, poet called Clive Ozeman. And for a while, he had this show where he was impersonating the Queen, and he would do things like he'd put a crown wig on that he'd bought from like a pound shop, a dollar store, and he'd do these poems about things like the Queen listening to the radio, having bet on a racehorse, and things like that. And he respectfully stopped it after the death of Prince Philip, which I think again is a testament to his character. But that shows just how far you can take something like that. And so, absolutely in favour of it.
I do want to add that like this whole eye and the performance could be taken, like you said, like it is taken so far, even with the language you use, because sometimes the language we use in our poetry is not the same as the one we speak. And there is a great example. I was once at an open mic, and there was this poet who was speaking a poem in the two levels of Arabic. Because in Arabic, there's the spoken Arabic, and then there's the upper level, the standard Arabic, which is used in official documents and all of that. And then he was alternating between them. And then towards the end, you would understand that when he's speaking with the standard Arabic, he was referring to his super ego. And then when he is speaking to using his modern or his regular Arabic, the spoken Arabic, it was the Egyptian dialect even. It was the ego, the person himself. And this is why I like this whole persona, because even there he's doing this two characters within one fighting with one another, and this slight difference makes a huge difference with that character or with that mask or with that persona. And yeah, this is where I take it. It's amazing.
I mean, that's magnificent on two levels. Firstly, to do that, and second of all, my eyes kind of lit up when you talked about the two levels of the language like that. That's just phenomenal. I'm a bit language nerdy anyway, but I didn't know that. That's absolutely fantastic that Arabic has that in it.
Well, it is. It is a diglossic language, and it's really interesting.
I absolutely love the interjection of the psychological aspect between the super ego and the ego, right? Just knowing what works in certain areas, right? Knowing what language you need to speak, right? Or what character you need to be in that space. Some people know it as double consciousness or code switching and negativity. But when it comes to something like this, I think it can be powerful for someone to have a character, right? Mm-hmm. Because then there's strength within that, right? So I think it's really, really important to embrace it and to be able to embrace it, and not only just, kind of play around with it, but to use it wisely, right? To bring in another aspect of not only creativity, but expression, right? And as poets, sometimes we open the doors for people, right? Because they're not really sure if they can get away with things or how it would be received, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we do it and say, oh my gosh, it works. So I think it's that level of fearlessness in this aspect that I truly, truly appreciate about what they've done. Both of these ladies, they're both amazing poets. The concept of, having a costume contest at an open mic, theme poems, right? All of these things kind of help to inspire people in different ways. So thank you, Heralds. I truly, truly appreciate your insight on this matter. And creativity, performance, all of it. Thank you so very much. All right, folks, we will take a short break and we will come back with Squigs. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Squigs, reporting for the Poetry News, broadcasting from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. But today I'd like to bring our attention to an article from across the pond from www.expressandstar.com. The article is written by James Vuk-Mirovic, a community reporter. The Wolverhampton Literary Festival is set to return with a bang. Poets, comedians, artists, and authors from across the world will be bringing their talents to this popular city literature festival, with a stellar lineup and a wide variety of shows announced to take place in February of next year. The festival took on a virtual format in 2021, providing events with the likes of Will Self, Rob Halford, and Robin Ince. But because of the fewer coronavirus restrictions, hopefully, the festival organizers hope to open up next year to audience to attend a range of events. Headliners of the festival will include Wolverhampton University alumni Abi Dari, who will talk about her New York Times best-selling novel, The Girl with the Louding Voice, the story of a Nigerian girl who longs for an education. There will also be appearances by acting deputy editor of Harper's Bazaar, Helena Lee, who will be talking about her upcoming publication of East Side Voices, exploring experiences from the East and Southeast Asian diaspora living in Britain today. The festival, again, with poets, will return again with poets, prattlers, pandemonialists, presenting the 5th Wolverhampton Literature Festival Poetry Slam, while the Punjabi Women Writing Group will deliver an event looking at the community cohesion. Acclaimed poet Liz Berry and rising star Romalyn Anti will also be performing poetry from their published anthologies at a joint event, and the role of Wolverhampton Poet Laureate will pass over from Emma Purhouse to Cully Coley. A range of workshops will also take place from a photo poetry adventure with Liz Berry, Tom Hicks, to flash fiction writing with David Gaffney. There's also a range of events for children, from storytelling with Amy Douglas to meeting with the author Serena Patel, a writer of Anisha, Accidental Detective Showstopper. To find out more and to book tickets, please go to www.wolverliteratureFestival.co.uk. The link is in the article. Again, that's from www.expressandstar.com. So I'd like to bring back our Heralds to talk about whether you're excited to attend literature festivals next year. You know, hopefully the pandemic we're in will come to a safer place for everybody.
You know, I absolutely am, and I was taking quite a few notes while you were talking about that, Squigs, because I think, you know, I'm very lucky where I am that I'm kind of spoilt for choice when it comes to literature festivals and poetry festivals, and I think it's very easy to take that for granted and forget that there's a lot of the world where it isn't like that. But I think even in the UK, there's a lot of places that seem to get most of the culture and most of the funding. You know, you're always going to find stuff in Birmingham or London, and even sort of smaller big cities like Nottingham. You're always going to find this stuff. But then there are so many other places where there are so many people who would love to get involved, but there isn't really much for them. And, you know, there was a famous article in Lonely Planet about 10, 11 years back that rated Wolverhampton as the 5th worst city in the world. And it's complete nonsense. It's not like that at all. You know, maybe it's a bit unloved in parts. I don't know. I've never been there, but I can't imagine it's the 5th worst city in the world. But things like that only go to propagate a stereotype, and things like literature festivals being in towns like Wolverhampton only serve to not only counteract that, but also bring stuff to people who want it and need it. Because I know when I was growing up, the nearest town to me was Guildford. I grew up in a village outside of it, and it was near enough to London and near enough to the south coast that everybody went to London and then they passed by on the A3 on the way to the south coast, or vice versa. And I had very limited exposure to music to poetry. I never saw live poetry until I was well into my 20s, just because nothing ever came there. And festivals like Wolves Literary Festival, just being there, going to towns where maybe there isn't so much to see, it's absolutely brilliant. And I'd recommend anybody to, just go there, put some money into the pubs, go check out the festival. It'd be great.
Yeah, you were talking about how there are so many parts of the world that don't have that. Lebanon is a perfect example for that. Like, I don't think I've ever heard of a literature festival, at least in my adult years, which are not that many. But I remember when I was younger, I was like 9 or 10. Beirut was named the literary capital of the world. And even then, there wasn't much, uh, like, there weren't many festivals, or any, if I can remember, regarding literature in that regard, where you have poets and performers and all these there. You would have like these festivals, like bookshops opening there just for a couple nights, and that's it. Nothing that will engage the audience in any way, shape, or form. Just, yeah, there's this big hall. Let's have these booths for people to for these businesses to sell books, and that was it. And not until recently did Lebanon start having these open mics, or this kind of light on performances, these alternative performances, or these um, events that are still very minimal. Like, I can't remember any literature or poetry festival, which is why my friends and I are trying to do this. We're trying to have a Christmas literature festival in a couple weeks, which is going to be something very small, but at least something. It's something. So yeah, whenever I hear people talking about poetry festivals and literature festivals, and I always imagine this really awesome thing, although I've never been to one, but I imagine it this cozy kind of homey place where I, as a poet, would find myself at home. And I cannot wait, honestly, to see something. I want to see something, and I bet it's going to be something great. Like, maybe to your standards, or maybe to other standards, it will be okay. It will be maybe not up to par with other things, but I would look at it. I'm like, yes. It's kind of like the first place you travel to, or the first time you're on an airplane. Everyone's there, like, yeah, it's a shuttle that just goes from one place to another. And then the first time you're there, it's like, oh, this is awesome, this is great. I just want to experience that. It's kind of yeah, I want to experience that. I don't know, I'm ranting here. Hi.
I actually love this aspect of the poetry festivals, right? Mainly because the two sides of the pandemic coin, right? It brought some negativity, right? A lot of horrible things happened during the pandemic. However, for me, the one positive thing that has come out of that is Zoom connections. And I think because of that, it is going to open up poetry festivals for everywhere, right? Like you're saying, Eddie, I'm in that boat with you. I've never been to a real poetry festival the way I'm seeing them now, right? I mean, fully, completely involved, community engagement, like really, really a big deal. I've never seen anything like that, right? But now that I've been exposed to them through my Zoom connections, I'm looking forward to what I'm going to hear from places like Nottingham or Singapore or Bangalore or Australia. These poetry festivals that have people that do a form of poetry that I'm not familiar with, but I'm so looking forward to hearing it and also sharing my poetry with them, right? Whereas I may not necessarily be in Singapore or Bangalore or Australia to be able to do these things, but the beauty of Zoom is allowing us to do that. And I think the addition of those new faces and those new voices are going to help poetry even evolve more and spread further, right? I think some of these other poetry festivals that may not have a larger connection are going to start focusing on these things, right? Let's connect all of these places so we can really share this global art of poetry.
it's a beautiful thing when we're connected, isn't it? You know, it's I always think, don't know if this metaphor works, but if you paint every wall in your house the same color, it's pretty boring. But if you put up a bookshelf and a picture on the wall and put some plants up and things like that, all of a sudden it just gets way more interesting, like a few family photos or whatever. And the same is absolutely true with poetry and poetry festivals. You know, and the festivals actively want people in, and Zoom can help with that. So bring it in, bring it on, and massive good luck to you, Eddie. Often amazing things start small. The first Glastonbury had 1,500 people in a field, and now it has nearly 200,000 people attending every year. Great things often start small.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your comments about festivals. So once again, that's for more information and to purchase tickets, please visit Wolves Literature Festival, one word, .co.uk. And so I suppose that's our show for this week. We'll have a short break, and when we come back, we'll have Martin closing out our week. And thank you everyone for your time. Please comment and comment some song lyrics. Looking forward to it from everyone.
So thank you everyone for tuning in today. We hope that some, or hopefully all, of the things that we've talked about today are of interest to you, and the links to everything are below. I still need to perfect that YouTuber finger pointing thing. We have loads going on here at PGN. We have the Poetry News, we have the Poets Lighthouse, we have the Poets Reacts, we have Feral on YouTube, we have Breathe Poet over on Instagram, we have Bottoms Up, our weekly open mic. Just follow us at Poetry Global Network, and there is so much poetry on there from so many wonderful poets. And Eddie has all the links.
Yes, you can know all about these shows and much more on all of our socials. Check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. And if you want anything, send us an email at thepoetryglobalnetwork@gmail.com. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment below. Tell us, what do you think about these festivals? What do you think about all the lines in poetry that we can use to write different golden shovel poetry? Tell us your opinion about costumes and about putting on a character for your poems, and tell us about grief poetry. Everything. You can tell us everything in the comments down below. And we will see you next week. I would like to thank Martin and Squigs for being here every week. And of course, thank you, Elemental, for filling in for Arson. You are amazing. You guys are all amazing. And that will be all we have for you this week. We will see you all next week.
See you next week, everyone.